Hi, I'm Debbie Harbeck, and I'm a certified life coach working with women in midlife and through the menopause transition. So each week, I'll be sharing the latest information, inspiration, and generate some momentum so you can move forward and feel more in control of your changing midlife body and your life. Let's go. Hi, and welcome to the Midlife Momentum Podcast. I'm thrilled to welcome my guest today, Eva Moon. Eva is an author, a humorist, songwriter, internationally produced playwright, award-winning option screenwriter, and performer. She's a former blogger for the Huffington Post, and her plays and musicals have been staged across the US and the UK, and her solo musical show, The Mutant Diaries, Unzipping My Jeans, is available streaming on Amazon. Her first novel, Pinocchio's Guide to the End of the World, which follows the adventures of a grown-up human Pinocchio in fascist Europe between the world wars, was released in March 2023. So welcome to the podcast, Eva.
Thank you, Debbie. I'm delighted to be here.
I am thrilled to have you here. I invited you on because you have a particular story that I think will resonate with a lot of my audience who are in midlife, of course. And so most of us who are in midlife, we're going through a lot of stuff, a lot of changes. Our bodies are changing. We've got a few more aches and pains, and we're questioning a lot of things. And I know you had a particular experience back a few years ago when you were in your 50s. Can you tell us exactly what happened?
Okay, yeah. No, on top of menopause and everything else, I learned that I carry a genetic mutation called BRCA1. And it gives if you have this mutation, you have an 87% chance of breast cancer and a 55% chance of ovarian cancer. And so I was immediately faced with further disrupting my life and my body by having preventive surgeries. In the space of 3 months, I had a double mastectomy and a total hysterectomy. And this was all while helping to care for my mother, who was dying of cancer from the same mutation, which she had passed on to me. So that gave me a real definite change of life, a definite before and after.
That's a lot to handle all at the same time. It must have been terribly difficult for you. A lot of difficult decisions there.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot to do, a lot to think about, and to some extent, it was just, the things happened fast. I had my hysterectomy within 3 weeks of learning I had the mutation, because I was older, I was in my 50s already, and they were just, the clock was ticking, and the doctor said, we need to get you in right away. So there wasn't, in some ways, it wasn't a lot of time to uh, think about it. I mean, there was time to think about it, but it's not like I was waiting years and trying to make this decision. So, but it was a big change, and not just physically, but emotionally, and a lot to deal with, and try to come to grips with the before and the after, who was I going to be when this was all done? What was going to be left?
Yeah, because I mean, emotionally, I can't imagine what that must have been like. But physically, you had a pretty physical job. You were an entertainer, is that right?
Yes, I'm a singer and musician, and I was doing a fair number of shows, and I kind of stopped doing shows for a while because I couldn't reconcile the performer, who I was doing when I was doing my original material, it was very cabaret, kind of sexy, I'm playing the piano and singing and flirting with the audience. And I said, how can I do that after, I mean, I've got 65 inches of scars and feel like the same person, but then what was I going to do? Was I going to stop being that person and suddenly become, mastectomy girl? It was, I kind of stopped that performance. I had another band that I was in, and that band kept going. because that wasn't my original material. It was just a band that I was in. But I was back on the stage when I still had surgical drains. I was trying to hide under loose
Wow.
tops.
Oh my gosh. That was brave.
Well,
That's
I wanted to do the show. It was at a festival, and it was a fun time, but it was very strange to be on stage that soon and have, after a mastectomy, and I was carrying around these tubes and drains and things, and I found it, but I found a cute sort of a kimono top
okay.
that sort of wrapped around, and I just wrapped it loosely, and I still looked okay for that.
Was it like, was doing that, did that help with like healing emotionally from what you had been through?
Um, yeah, I mean, it was really that particular show was very tiring.
Mm.
But I had friends in the audience, and they knew what had happened, and I got a lot of support too. That at that on that day, that felt good. But I still didn't really know what I was going to do about my own material, my original material, because I had stopped performing that and stopped writing it, and I just didn't know how I was gonna what was I gonna do. But then I wrote a song really just for myself and for my husband, about, because he was having a hard time understanding what it meant to me to lose these body parts. He didn't think about them in the same way that I did. And he was supportive and loving, but he just didn't really get my emotional attachment to my body. So I wrote this song called "Where Are You Now, My Dancing Girl?"
Mm.
And it's just about sort of saying goodbye to my former self and not knowing what the future brings. And I didn't pl- I played it for him, and that was the moment when he got it. So I was that was the first time I used my music to take a step into my new world. And I still wasn't thinking about doing it publicly or anything, but that was an important moment to realize that I could still write something in it that would connect in that way.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And I mean, it's so rewarding to be able to use a gift that you have and to be able to use it to explain to the person you love what you're going through and have them react to it and finally get it. I just, what a way to communicate. I love that. It's beautiful.
I think part of it was just that he had to wait and just listen until the end of the song rather than, there wasn't anything for him to do, to try and jump
Mhm.
in and fix things. Guys want to, be your knight in shining armor and come in and slay dragons. And when he's listening to a song, he just has to listen. So I think that was part of what made a difference for him.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's what happens is they do try to come to your rescue, but here he just had to sit there and let you get through it. And
Hmm.
wow, that was so powerful. So where did that take you after that?
Well, not long after that, I'd had my hysterectomy and my mastectomy, and I was waiting for the reconstruction, and I wrote another song, and this was more of a humorous song, but it was about everything that I'd gone through in the hospital, because when you go to the hospital, there's drama and there's tears and there's, fear and all of that, but there's also like ridiculous things that happen. And so I wrote this song called Ta Ta Tatas. that was just kind of this lighthearted look at the indignity of going to the hospital and starting, but have also having, gotten through it and woken up and been okay, and starting to see that that things might be okay. And that was more like my old self, the sort of joking around and finding something to at least smile about if I couldn't like laugh out loud. So I called my mentor, a friend of mine, who's a longtime Broadway and opera performer and has mentored me over the years. And I played her both of the songs.
Right.
And she said, "Oh, Eva, you have to do a show." And I said, "No, there's just no way I'm going to do a show. I can't, I've been this other person, this cabaret performer, and now I'm going to get on stage and talk about my surgery." But she'd put the bug in my ear, and I sat down and just started writing, and it just kind of gushed out. It was like a week later, I had this rough draft of an hour-long one-woman show with 9 original songs.
Wow.
And I obviously it needed to happen because it just poured out. And I actually finished, and that's what became the Mutant Diaries, Unzipping My Jeans. And that became a way for me to come to grips with who I was going to be and who I was, and also where I had just been entertaining people before. And not that I'm dissing the value of entertaining people. I could help people now. I had,
Hmm.
I had an experience that other people were facing, and I could be an example of survival and resilience if I could be resilient. And I was heading that way. So I put the show together, and actually my first performance of that show was at my mother's bedside in hospice just a few days before she passed away. And she was she was beyond being able to speak at that point, but I could see from her facial expressions that she understood what I was doing. And we all cried buckets. And I've done the show a lot of times since then, but none of it, and I've done it better certainly, but there's no performance that would be close to as meaningful as that one was.
No, well, I've got tears in my eyes now too.
I know. I'm just trying to hold it together here, and that was like 11 years ago.
Yeah, well, it's always going to be there fresh because like you said, it's the most meaningful performance that you've done. And oh my gosh, that's so beautiful. I'm just in awe of what you were able to do from this because I would think most people going through this, it's a hugely traumatic experience to lose, like you said, these body parts that are so important to you. So you identify with this, with them, and you just like turned it around in a way to, I think it sounds like you were doing it for yourself, for your husband, and then just for everyone else. Like I think it must have been extremely healing for you to do this.
Yeah, I had been wondering in the years, when I was turning 50. That was a hard birthday, and I know a lot of your audience can probably relate to that.
Mm-hmm.
The whole year of 49 was like, oh my God, my life is, the downhill slope from here. And what is the second half of my life going to look like? And what's my purpose going to be when I can no longer do the things that I could when I was younger? Having this experience, and I don't want to, say that I wish everyone could have this experience, but it gave me a focus and a sense of purpose that I'm grateful for, and I don't have any regrets. I have 2 sisters, and of course, all 3 of us got tested for the mutation after we learned my mother had it, and both of my sisters tested negative for the mutation. I was the only one that tested positive. And I think I was the best one of the three of us because, well, I love attention, and I and I was able to use this in a way that's been so gratifying. I've met so many women as I've performed this show across the US and twice in the London area, and then heard from people who've watched the video that, it's been in some cases transformative for them to finally believe that there could be life and love and joy and hope after going through all of this.
Oh,
So
yeah.
that's just been incredibly rewarding, and I feel
Wow.
lucky. I feel very lucky. Um, I'm healthy.
Hmm.
Aside from that, everything, I'm grateful.
I mean, you created that. You you created that out of like probably the darkest time of your life. That you created the probably the most beautiful thing you've ever done. So it's amazing. I love that story. I know nobody wants to go through these things, and like you said, I don't wish it on anybody, but to take that and be able to use it, and not only for your own good, but for so many other people, I don't think there's anything more powerful than that. So I'm in awe. That's amazing.
Thank you. I don't want to I don't want to your listeners to get the idea that you have to, have talent or that is a rare thing to be able to find growth and resilience through trauma. Anyone can, I believe. And I had my music, and I'm grateful for that. But and here's a story that I like to tell. This is not an original story with me, but it resonated with me so strongly that I tell everybody this story. Imagine you're walking down a hallway carrying a very full cup of coffee, and someone walking the other way bumps your arm and your coffee spills.
Mm.
And if I asked you, why did you spill your coffee? What would you say?
Well, because I wasn't paying attention.
Uh, that's one way to look at it. But the way I like to look at it is, well, I spilled my coffee because that was what was in my cup. If I'd
Mm.
had tea in my cup, I would have spilled tea. And life is going to bump your elbow. Life is going to jostle you. No one gets through unscathed. And whatever it is that you fill your cup with, that's what's going to spill out in those stressful, traumatic moments. And you don't have to be, a great talent, a singer, or a painter, or an author, or anything like that to be able to be mindful about filling your cup in small, frustrating moments with the kind of things that you want to have in hard moments. A small, how do you react when someone cuts you off in traffic? How do you react when you can't do something or you can't remember, like in midlife, you've forgotten a word, and it's a word that you've known
Never
your whole
happens.
life. It never happens. You've forgotten a word, and but you're so angry at yourself for forgetting this word that you don't want to ask someone to help. Instead of reacting with frustration or anger, take a breath, ask for help. uh, um, you know find something funny about the situation. That's my go-to, is what's the ridiculous angle on this.
Yeah,
And
you clearly do that. And I love that. I love what you're saying because it's about choosing how you're going to react to something instead of just jumping to the first thing that you would do is like, oh, wait a second, what just happened? And actually getting to choose how you're going to deal with it.
So I think, we can mindfully prime ourselves for resilience, and anyone can do that. Anyone.
Yeah, I definitely believe that. I know in my own life, well, for me, it was is losing my mom was a big thing. She also
Mm-hmm.
died of cancer when she was in her
Mm-hmm.
50s, actually.
I'm so
And
sorry.
so it's, but from there, like, what do you do with that? You can let that derail you completely, or you can decide you're going to do something about it. In my life, so I ended up following what I wanted to do, which was led me down the path of fitness and yoga and all those things that I really wanted to do because I was an engineer before. Yeah, it just put things in perspective, made me realize how precious this life is and how do I want to live it? What do I want to
Mm-hmm.
do with it? And you've done that
Absolutely.
too. You've taken it and you said, what do I want to do here with this? And I'm sure you were at the time completely upside down with all of it because it must have been
I
so
don't want
heavy.
anyone to get the idea that I was, strong every minute of this. I mean, I had,
Mm,
weeping festivals of,
yeah.
just, poor me. But and this is something I got from my mother, was a predisposition to look for things to laugh about, laughter. And I hadn't thought about it consciously, but that's what I've been filling my cup with my whole life, was looking for the laugh, looking for the light side, looking for the ridiculous. And I'll tell you one experience I had that really brought this into focus for me was right after I had been to see the genetic counselor and learned that I had this mutation, and I was in shock. And the counselor said there's this organization called Force that's facing our risk of cancer empowered, and it's specifically an organization for people with genetic cancer risk. And she says they have a forum, and you can go on the forum, join the forum, and you can ask questions and talk to people who've gone through this experience before you. And so I did that, and it was tremendously helpful. I had a very short amount of time to make decisions about what kind of reconstruction I wanted, and who did I want to do my surgeries, and what did I need to bring to the hospital that I hadn't thought of, and just a million
Mhm.
little decisions. So the women on this forum were just so incredibly warm and helpful, and while going through their own traumas. And after I had my hysterectomy, and I was lying on the couch, and my cat kept trying to walk on my stomach, which I didn't want. And so I wrote a limerick, and I'm sorry if I thought I was going to tell this story, I would have looked at the limerick. But I wrote a limerick about trying to keep my cat off of me. Uh, and a limerick is just it's a humorous short poem.
Yes.
Um, and uh, and then I wrote a couple more limericks because I had a friend who we would trade limericks with, just on any news of the day or whatever. So I wrote a couple limericks, and I thought, well, should I post them on the forum? And should I was a little nervous about it because I was afraid that people would think I was making light of something that was serious, that
Mm.
people were losing relatives and dealing with cancer, and here I was going to post these silly poems. But I decided, oh, what the heck, and I posted 3 silly limericks about recovering from surgery. And oh my god, it unleashed the floodgates. People started writing their own limericks about everything, about sex after menopause, and about stitches and drains, and chemotherapy, and husband's reactions. I mean, they wrote funny poems about every hard thing. I think, by the time that the juice sort of drained out of this particular forum thread, there were over 300 limericks
Oh,
that people had
wow.
written, limericks and short poems that people had written, and so many have said, this is the first time I've smiled since I
Mm,
found out I had this mutation. And that was early on. So that was like the first glimmer I had that maybe there was something I could do with this. And
yeah.
I had just written these dashed off these three little 5-line poems. Um, but it led to so much warmth and connection. And that was the first clue that I had that there might be a path in the future that wasn't just saying
Mm,
goodbye to my old self.
yeah, I love that because when things are so serious, it feels like, oh, should humor be injected here? Should we be laughing? But I think we need to laugh. We need that. It cuts the pressure, it cuts the all that emotion that we have inside. It just breaks it open and it gives us an outlet. And I love that you did that and that you were brave enough to actually post them. But look what it did was that's amazing. What a beautiful thing. And I'm sure you helped so many women with just those three limericks.
You never know.
Yeah. You don't know,
You
but
don't
it's
know.
beautiful. I love that story. And I know now you've gone on to write a book which you released this year
Yes.
about Pinocchio as an adult, I think.
Yes. Yes. And that
So,
came out of this it as well. Because even though I found ways to have positive outcomes, I still had thoughts and things that were circulating in my head about identity and sort of imposter syndrome. Here I was different on the outside than I had been on the inside. I felt like a different person people were seeing me in a different way. And in some ways I still that sexy cabaret singer was still buried in there somewhere. And reconciling the old and the new, reconciling the changes, and not just for people going through trauma, but anyone going through menopause. How do you reconcile your former self with this changed person?
yeah.
And Pinocchio became sort of a way for me to explore those questions, because the original story ends when the blue fairy turns him into a real boy, and your assumption is that he's gotten his wish and now he's just going to be living happily ever after, and everything's going to be great because he got his wish. Well, I question our ability to know what's going to make us happy in the future and what's going to make us sad in the future. I think that if we actually knew, we'd be very surprised. And I started wondering, did Pinocchio how did that work out for him? Because he is walking around with this flesh and bone and muscle human body, but emotionally, didn't he still feel like this person he'd been his entire life up to then, this wooden boy? Did he feel imposter syndrome? Did he feel like he wasn't, he was pretending, on some way to be like other people when he wasn't like other people? And
Mm.
how did that play out for him? And I wrote a short play called Geppetto's Funeral that looked at him at midlife, having regrets and kind of wishing he'd stayed wood. And that I kept thinking about him as that character. And then I ended up writing this whole novel, which is not the same Pinocchio from Geppetto's Funeral, but a younger Pinocchio, the years, from the time he became human until about 35, growing up and dealing with this imposter syndrome and dealing with being in ways that frustrated him, the same person he'd always been, which is impulsive. And then I set him in fascist Europe, in the years between the world wars, to give him challenges to face and adventures to have, but also because it just felt like relevant to things that I was seeing in our own times, the increased divisiveness and rise of populism and strongmen, strongman governments, and so so
Oh,
that gave me an interesting backdrop to explore his adventure, and it was also exciting. I didn't want it to just be a big long mope by Pinocchio trying to find himself, but give him adventures to have. So that book came out in March, and it's been really fun listening to what people think of it. It's getting very good reviews, and it's available on Amazon. I just
yeah.
recently released the audiobook. I had a great reader for that. Yeah. I know that, a book about Pinocchio might not be the first thing that your listeners think of as something that they would want to read, but I think they would find a lot to relate to in his struggles. And I hope that they'll at least click the link below the podcast
Yeah, and it will be there.
and read the little blurb and see if it's something that might interest them, because it was
Absolutely.
really, part of my evolution writing that book.
I love that you did that, that you saw so many parallels with your own journey and his. And by the way, I bought the book, so I haven't had a
Oh,
chance
thank
to
you.
read it, but I am going to read it because I find it fascinating and I love the whole idea, like you said, of imposter syndrome. And I think we do feel like that. I know I do in midlife, where what is going on inside me is not what's going on outside me.
Hmm.
So you feel like, what do other people notice this? Is it just me? But I love that. So I'm definitely going to read it. How did it help you in writing this book, to come to terms and to accept the body you do have now?
It's hard to say how much writing the book helped me come to terms with the body that I have now, and how much is due to just time passing.
Mm,
Um, my body continues to change. I'm 11 years older than when I had the surgeries, and a lot of things change. Life continues to change, and but I feel at peace with the
okay.
way things are going. There's things I miss about my younger self, but I know that there's still more to come. It's not over yet. I'm still curious about the world, and looking forward to seeing what's next. But
Yeah.
I think I'm calmer now than I was, and that's okay. I've closer to home. I think the pandemic did some of that. Finding peace in your home. So it's hard to know. So many things have happened. It's hard to say, oh, this caused this.
Yeah. Yeah. But you have come to a place where you feel at peace with your body the way it is, and that you can feel good again. That you said it took time to get to that place, but you got there.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's things that I miss. I have a beautiful reconstruction of my breasts, but they're numb.
Yes.
I miss that. I miss those sensations.
Mm.
Um, but and I'm older now, so things are heading south. Um, but I still, I exercise, I walk a lot, and I still feel strong physically. I feel like I can still do the things that I want to do. My body is it may be different from what it was before, but it's still pretty capable. It may not be
Yeah.
as pretty as it was, but it's capable of doing things. And when I go walking, everything feels like it's lining up. I can feel my spine and my hips, that just because I've kept moving,
Mm-hmm.
that it just is such a good feeling to feel like your body is aligned, even if it's a little heavier or a little saggier than it was, it's still strong. It still can move me around and take me to the places I want to go.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think that's a really good place to go in your mind about it, because I know a lot of women do struggle with their body image. Even if they haven't had any surgeries, they're struggling at this time of life because of the changes happening. And I think that's a really good place to focus, is feeling strong in your body. I think it's a very powerful thing. It's
Mm-hmm.
not just about what it looks like. It's about how is it still capable? Is it still able to take you from A to B? What are all the things you can still do with it? And you can still get stronger, and you can still make positive changes in your body. And yeah, it's just coming to terms with it in a different way, and not looking at
Mm-hmm.
it so much. Like you said, you use the word pretty, but maybe you can redefine what pretty is for you at this point. It might
Mm-hmm.
not fit into what society is saying is pretty, but you can find it and redefine it for yourself. So I think it's a really good thing to remember.
There were a, a couple things before we end our chat today that I wanted to tell your listeners, especially listeners who are going through menopause or going through a big change, and that is to find ways of celebrating transitions. And I mean, literally celebrating a big transition, uh, finding some way to really honor what you're going through as part of it is an important turning point in a journey. About 4 days before my mastectomy, I had a boob voyage party, and I invited all my girlfriends. That's something that's been great about getting older, is that I really treasure my female friends so much. Anyway, I invited all my girlfriends, and we had a booby cake,
Hmm.
and we had cocktails, and we had music, and we danced, and I ate the maraschino cherry nipples off the cake without using my hands, and um I sang them my songs that I had, the two songs, the Where Are You Now, My Dancing Girl, and Ta 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 Ta's. At that point, those were the only two songs I'd written for that. And then I did this thing that I'd been kind of wanting to do, but not brave enough to do until, it was like, what the hell? This is happening. So I got completely undressed. I mean, everything, completely naked. And I got up on a chair, and I gave my friends little cups of paint and paintbrushes and let them paint my body from head to toe.
Wow.
And I'd let them paint my body, and they painted me everywhere. I mean, literally everywhere, in bright colors. There were flowers, there were vines, there were words, there were swirls and stars. And then one of my friends had brought a little box of sequins, and everyone pressed sequins into the wet paint. I have pictures. And
I hope so. I hope you do.
and it was the most wonderful experience to just have them like honor my body in that
Mm,
way.
yeah.
And it was so delightful to do that. And it gave me a lot of joy, and I think it gave them joy too, to find, we gave them a way to express their concern for me in a light and beautiful way. So that was my send off for 4 days later.
Hmm.
And I'm getting ready for my surgery in the morning, and I got it was getting undressed for bed, and I pulled down my pants, and this solitary sequin fluttered to the floor, and I have no idea where that sequin was hiding for 4 days.
We'll
But I
never
kept
know.
it. But and I talked to other women who have done similar things. They've had, like they've taken casts of their breasts, like
Mm-hmm.
plastic, and like a sculpture, or had boudoir photos taken, the
Yeah.
sexy pictures taken, something to remember them by. People, whatever your comfort level is. Obviously, I'm pretty open to trying things, but even if you're,
Mm-hmm.
even more shy than I am, there's things that you can do to honor a change that you're going through and celebrate it,
Yeah.
because
I
this is a transition, and it's one door is closing, but another one's opening, because that's how doors work.
Yes, 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 yes. I love that. I just love that story. I love, the whole idea of your friends painting your body and the sequence. And so
Hmm.
I love that idea of celebrating your body. And even if you haven't, even if you're keeping your boobs and even if you're not getting any surgery, just appreciating and appreciating that you're going through a transition in your life and to celebrate it in some way. I think that's such a powerful thing to do.
Yeah.
So, yeah, thanks for sharing that. So good. And so before we do go, I just want to ask, as I do ask my guests, is what has been the best part for you of getting older?
Perspective,
Hmm.
having more perspective. When I turned 60, I wrote a letter to my 50-year-old self
Mm.
that I think would answer that question. And I can read it if you like. It's not very long.
Yeah, no, I love that.
Here's my letter that I wrote. I wrote this when I was 60. Dear me, hey there, 50. It's me, 60. Still alive, as you can see. You spent the whole year leading up to your 50th birthday in a stew of worry. What tortures does menopause have in store for me? Will I be forced to retire my youthful dreams for more modest, mature aspirations? Is it too late to fix all the mistakes I made raising my children? How could standing in the wings, watching younger performers on stage, ever be as sweet as standing in the spotlight myself? Will I become dried up, washed out, sidelined, invisible? Will there still be sex? I won't trivialize your pain. It was real enough at the time, but let me clue you in on a few things. The ride from 50 to 60 is going to be wild and rocky, but you'll do more than just survive. Some bad things are going to happen that you didn't even think to worry about. You'll lose some people you really love. Your mother, your father in law, and your mother in law top the list. You'll cry with many friends as they struggle with loss and pain too. You'll lose your own breasts and uterus and ovaries over several life changing months of pain and panic. But some things will just cruise along with a few bumps. You'll survive menopause. Your kids will be fine. They'll find jobs and become people you like hanging out with and who make you feel like you didn't totally blow the mom thing. You'll get a bunion and you'll need reading glasses and you'll struggle to keep your weight under control, but you'll manage. You'll still have sex. It won't be the same, but it'll still be good, just in a different way. You picked a good man. Some really amazing, unexpected, and wonderful things will happen too. You'll find your voice in writing and embark on a whole new career. Pain becomes art, art becomes joy, and all that worry about losing your spot on stage. Just wait until you stand in the wings and hear your words in the mouths of younger performers. You'll support and encourage other artists in meaningful ways. You'll rediscover the joy of best girlfriends and treasure them in ways that never crossed your mind when you were so worried about being attractive to men. So while there are things to worry about, ultimately, there's nothing to worry about. I have no desire for do overs. I don't want to stop the clock now that it's ticking towards such promising adventures. You saw 50 as a precipice you were teetering on the edge of, and it was a long, long way down. But the precipice is where you have to go for the best view. And 60 feels like wings.
Mm.
With love, 60.
Wow. Bravo. I love that. Beautiful, beautiful. It's such a way to wrap up that difficult decade
Yeah.
for you. You know, it's a really beautiful way to sum it all up and end on a high, literally.
Yeah,
And
I have no way, I have no idea what I'm going to write when I turn 70. It
yeah,
might
well,
be
you
something
kind of hope
completely
it'll be
different.
more plain than that, but I mean, you're still doing things. You just wrote a book, so I'm
Yeah,
sure there's a lot of things in store in your 60s, and you're already partway through, so I'm sure there's a lot you're going to write in that letter to yourself as well. So,
we'll
and
see.
that's such an inspiring thing to do. I should do that. I love that idea. I just turned 51, so get right to my 41-year-old self because I didn't do it at
Mhm.
50. But what a great idea. Thanks so much for sharing that. I really, really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
So, I'm kind of sad that we're gonna have to say goodbye to you, but
Oh,
it's been such a really nice chat, and I really love everything you shared, and I just think it's going to offer so much value to everybody who's listening. So,
I hope so.
if anybody in my audience wants to get in touch with you, learn more about you, how can they get in touch with you?
Oh, the best way is to go to my website. It's evamoon.net.
EvaMoon.
And I'm also on I'm social media. I mostly do Facebook. Uh, Eva Moon Writer is my professional page on Facebook. And I do a little bit of Instagram, but my website is the best way to reach out to me because I have a contact form. I love talking to people. Feel free to write.
Mm, I'm sure you'll get some
And
some writing.
I hope
Maybe a
so.
limerick or two.
That would be nice. That would be nice. Well, a limerick about your podcast.
Yeah, that would be great. That would be great. Anybody who wants to write a limerick for Eva about the podcast, that would be welcome. So that would be amazing. Thank you so much. And of course, all the information you shared, including the link to your book, will be in the show notes and as part of this podcast. So thanks again for joining me. And I hope we can talk again soon, Eva. I look forward to finding out maybe when you're 70 and we can we can see how the decade
Yeah.
went.
Yeah, well, keep in touch. It was delightful to talk to you. I really enjoyed our chat today.
Thank you so much. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Midlife Momentum Podcast. If you want to learn more about working with me, come visit me at debbieharbeckcoaching.com. That's Debbie, I-E, Harbeck with a C, coaching.com. See you next week.